Welcome to Coffee with the Sarlos. We are your hosts of the show, Karen and Kelly Sarlo. Whether you're struggling with grief or you just need answers, we connect you with spirit to find relief, clarity, and direction in life. We can help you move forward.
Hi, Kelly.
Good morning.
Good morning. I went straight to Harry Potter again.
Okay.
And I chose two names, Cho and Fleur.
Cool.
And I have no idea. I can't remember who they are.
They're not villains.
Oh, okay. Sadly, which made me think that I need to go back and watch Harry Potter again. Mm-hmm. Because when you're looking up the names and you don't remember any, or not any of them, but you don't remember some.
They're fairly main.
They're fairly what?
They're secondary, but they're main enough that they're names you should know.
I should know. Oh, jeez. Okay. So I'm obviously making up names for the clients that I'm going to talk about in this podcast show. And Cho is alive. She's the client. And Fleur is the person who's crossed over. And at the beginning of the session, so let's just set it up in that Cho has gone through consent. She's asked for medium. She's asked for Fleur. And Fleur is super happy and extremely organized to come in to speak to Cho. And this is not, how can I be cute? How can I be fun and bring up fun memories? The energy is serious. And I explain this to Cho. I say, geez, this feels like...
business?
Yes, that's a good word, Kelly. Like a business conversation. Like, let's get down to some real shit that's going on. And I say that, and I can see in Cho that she's relieved. It's not you're not going to say she has brown hair and blue eyes and entertain me? And I said, no. I said, this hasn't got the feel of an entertainment. Well, I don't think any of my sessions have an entertainment feel.
You are, but I get your point.
Oh, okay. And I said, are you good with that? And she said, yeah. She says, it's part of the reason why I've picked Fleur. There are so many other people on the other side. I've got grandparents. I've got parents that have passed. I've got a lot of people. She said, I picked Fleur because I know she's the one that's going to come and speak to me with some honesty. And I said, they all will at this point because they're dead. Mm-hmm. And she goes, I didn't realize that. She says, I thought, I didn't realize that people would change on the other side. And I said, okay. So I just leave that comment be. And I said, let's get right in. And Fleur, what do you want to do? And she says, I want to talk to her about the way that she thinks. And she says, so I'm gonna have to give you examples. Of the questions that she asks herself and the type of thinking she does. And I said, okay, you go. And she said, could you write them down on your notepad in front of you? And I said, yeah. And so I did. Not all of them, by the way. I got a few on the pad. And so Fleur starts and she says she often thinks in terms of, what did I say wrong? Like, this person's angry or they're upset with me or they're just not happy with me. So what did I say wrong? How could I change what I've said? How could I word it differently? So standing in front of the person, she'll even say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't word that right. I could have used better words. Give me a minute and I'll reword what I said. Like, she'll even announce that she's trying to word it in a way that won't offend or in ways that she's trying to control the emotions of the other person. And so I gave that as the first example, and she goes, he's going to hit me right between the eyes. And she goes, okay. She goes, it's good. She says, it's what I need. And she said, holy shit, though, it's really true, I do that. And I said, and then what Fleur's explaining is that because you believe that, because this is a thought process that's really front and center in all of your conversations, you have constant anxiety because you're always looking to see immediately as soon as you speak, how's the person going to take what I say and how quickly can I change it so they're not mad at me And she goes, oh, God, yeah. And I said, you do that with your children? And she goes, Fleur knows I have kids. And I said, yeah, yes. So you see some of the validations come in that Cho likes, but I got to give her credit, Kelly, because even though she gives you that little moment of, oh, like, I like that, she stays focused on what Fleur is telling her, and she doesn't try.
She's not diverting.
Yeah, you can see she doesn't use any of it to divert, but she appreciates it and then stays on task to listen. And Fleur points that out eventually in the session and tells her what a good job she's doing for somebody that has these other patterns in the way that she thinks.
It's a sign of intelligence.
Yeah.
It genuinely is a sign of intelligence because she can be doing two things at once. Right? Where she can find delight in a message, but she doesn't divert her attention to avoid an emotionally difficult situation.
Yes.
Right? To stay present and aware of what really needs to be dealt with, but to hear beauty at the same time. I think she's doing a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And that would be true for anyone. And she has anxiety. So
Yes.
exceptional job.
Yeah. So all throughout the entire session, Fleur stays very focused on the fact that all of the things that she brings up contributes to Cho living in a state of anxiety, and what she proves.
Speaking of being picky with language, when you say all of the things she brings up contributes to her living in a state of anxiety, are you talking about Fleur being a source of Cho's anxiety, or are you talking about Fleur affirming what Cho's going through?
Affirming what Cho's going through. Thank you. I love when you do that.
Well, yeah, you also haven't stated the relationship. We know nothing about the two of them yet, so I'm just a curious session so far.
Okay. So, and actually, Kelly, I think at the very beginning of the relationship, I didn't know, or
the session.
At the very beginning of the session, I didn't know the relationship either, and it wasn't offered. Fleur really just began the whole session and dove right into everything immediately. And then she continues, and she says, okay, she says, Cho also will ask herself questions like, how do I fix this? So she instantly goes to, it's my responsibility to fix. And Cho, when I say this to Cho, she goes, oh God. She goes, I didn't even think about the responsibility part. She goes, I just went right to, it is my responsibility to fix it. But you've just used the word responsibility, and I didn't think of that.
And it's actually an over responsibility.
Yes. And eventually we get to that part. But when I first say that, she's like, oh. She goes, where did I get that?
From an anxious attachment style.
Yeah. And so Fleur has to take her time to say, and really meet Cho where she is as she takes in the information. And we really have to slow down and make sure that the session is really where Cho is capable of being, as opposed to just making sure I channel and I get out the messages and it's about me channeling. And that's it. Let me just get out my stuff, right? So I have to really stay connected to everything that Fleur is saying and trust constantly that as Cho is changing or absorbing something or processing something for the first time perhaps, that if Fleur tells me to take a break and take a pause and not talk, I don't.
You do.
Or pardon me.
She obeys orders, just to be clear.
I do. Okay, so then, and I have to give examples. So Fleur also tries to give as many examples as she can when she sees or feels that Cho needs the example. But if she doesn't and she thinks Cho's finding her own examples in her mind, she kind of moves on and we'll go to the very next thing that Cho's doing. So she'll say that she goes into fix mode, which means she's trying to solve a problem for another person in the form of advice, in the form of stories about, oh, this is what I did in that situation. And Fleur says, honey, What you did in that situation was very codependent, and you're giving advice that creates codependency. And Cho sits there and goes, well, son of a gun. And I said, does this explain to you, Cho, why some people don't want to listen to you then? And she goes, yes. Go ahead.
I think that's a really great example as to one reason why people might not want to listen. You can also just simply want a listener. And when someone comes in and gives help and advice, healthy or unhealthy, and then potentially offers, well, here's what I did, and offers storytelling when that's not what you were looking for, we also don't want to listen. And this is the beauty of sessions, is that people or souls, pardon me, on the other side meet us where we're at. And oftentimes humans are not capable or are unwilling to do that.
Yeah. Thank you. We made a list, Joe, and Fleur and I actually made a list on paper. And I'll say Cho recorded the session as well. And I put things down on my little notepad where she would say she fixes, and then she would say, this is how people respond to when she fixes, where they will shut down, they will ghost her, they will tell her they weren't looking for that, or whatever. It's a fight, it's this, it's that. And how Cho then sees they don't appreciate me. They don't this. And she makes it like that they're the ones that are wrong, and that she doesn't see how she started it. And I'll say started it because that was very important for Cho to be able to see, oh, I'm the one that's initiating this problem. Therefore, if I look at me and I change some of my behaviors, then the way that I'm thinking and the way that I'm listening, the way that I'm speaking, then the other person won't respond. I won't be, quote unquote, triggering the other person. And when I said that to Cho, she went, Fleur's been listening. I said, why? She goes, oh, I have a story. She says to me, of somebody who just told me recently that I trigger them. And she said they were trying to point out that I wasn't listening. They were trying to say these things to me that Fleur is saying. And man, Karen, she says, I can see right now, and I can feel right now my shame that this person was really honest and was trying to point out these things to me, and there was no way that I was having it. And she said, so I can see where I became the brick wall. And they didn't call me the brick wall. They just said that I was stubborn and that they couldn't talk to me. And she said, so I can now understand based on what Fleur's saying, because she's pointing out the way that I think and how I approach it, that in fact, I am stubborn. And that in fact, when people point out and say these things about my behavior, that they're right. And that I wasn't willing to see that in the least. I was falling back saying that I was loving them, that I was trying, that all the things I was doing.
Murder.
Yes. And Fleur says to her, well, yeah, because if you can victimize yourself, then you can't see anything. You don't have to do any of the work on yourself.
Now they have to comfort you.
Yes. An example that Fleur pointed out was a work example where her boss or her supervisor called her in to have a meeting about something. And Cho approached the meeting thinking she was going to get praise and that she was going to be thanked for all the work that she did, because that's what happened. She did all kinds of work. And she couldn't think of any reason she was going to get into trouble. So she thought this was going to be great. And her supervisor sat her down and said that she was a problem. And Cho said no. And she tried to point out all the work she'd been doing. And the supervisor said, no, these things that you've been assigned to do is your workload. And where are you at in any of these things? And Cho was like, well, she didn't want to answer the question because she wasn't at it. She wasn't doing that. She was barely getting by in her own workload. And she said, well, but that's not the point. She says, I'm here 8 hours and longer sometimes. And here's all the work that I've done, but it was other people's work. So Cho's boss has a heck of a time, Kelly. trying to have Cho stay focused on the fact that her responsibility is to do her own job, and she's doing other people's work.
What a metaphor for life.
And as a result of helping the other people, when her piece is supposed to come into play that they rely on, it's not done. And then she's defensive and angry that she didn't have the time to do that, but that she was helping all of these other people and doing other people's jobs because they asked for help, they needed help, and she sees it as, I'm supposed to be a team player, I'm supposed to. And so Fleur says to Cho, you don't ask yourself the right questions in your mind. So instead of thinking other things, and so now we start writing out some of the other questions, like what will happen if I don't do my workload when the time comes? If I'm helping everybody else, what will happen if it's not done? And so Cho just sits there and she goes, of course I don't ask myself that. I'm supposed to be doing this. My priority is I'm supposed to be helping when it's needed. And you can see where Cho becomes defensive in the conversation, the way she would with speaking to the boss. And the boss, like, is just
A boss?
Yeah, isn't going to have it in that conversation. So Fleur says to Cho, look, your boss is trying to redirect your thinking by asking you different questions that you need to be asking yourself. And Cho freezes and goes, oh my God, I just saw it as criticism.
That's a good leader.
Yes. And she goes, but Fleur's right. She did ask me a lot of questions. And I sat there defensively in every single reply instead of realizing that she was trying to teach me the questions to ask myself. She goes, I didn't understand that at all. And then I said, now, Cho, now that you're realizing it, Fleur and I don't want you to go into any self-shame at this moment. And she goes, I'm at the bottom of my barrel. And I said,
Well, that's good. There's no deeper.
yeah. And I said, now, that is exactly what you do, though. As soon as you have failed or perceiving that you have failed at something, is that you go straight into feeling shame. And she goes, I don't know. And then you see this panicky moment of, I don't know how to name what I feel. And Fleur breaks it down and says, you don't feel good enough. And Cho goes, yes. You don't feel smart enough. Yes. You don't feel, and so Fleur starts to put to words exactly what Cho feels in the not smart enough, not a teammate, going to be criticized, going to be left out of the group. All of these feelings and fears. And I literally am told to like doodle them as I'm going through. So I write them really quickly as Fleur is saying them. And Cho is sitting there looking at me. I thought she was going to cry, but I got to give her a lot of credit. She didn't go into her, she just didn't tear up. She sat there and was really trying to be present to say, that's right, that's wrong. I do feel that I don't. You could see how hard she was working to actually identify what it was that she was feeling. And Fleur says, and what it is you're doing. And Cho looks at me and goes, holy shit. She goes, I feel like you've taken time and like you've expanded it on me in order to fill in what's happening and what I'm doing that I don't even realize I'm in the process of doing, and my boss is seeing the process, trying to help me with it, but I can't see it for myself because I have to go so fast. And Fleur goes, right, exactly. And she made some comment about, yes, Cho, you had to do these things quickly or mom would be mad. And it's at that point that I figure out, oh, these are sisters. I had no idea. At first, Kelly, I swear to God, I thought they were coworkers. I thought because Fleur had so much about her work environment, but it all had to do with the fact that it was the boss, it was her supervisor that was so concerned about Cho and was really trying to keep her as an employee and not just fire her ass. Because she had empathy for her and she could actually understand that Cho just didn't seem to understand what she was doing. And that because she just didn't understand her own self and her own behaviors, that wasn't enough reason to fire somebody. The conversation at that point goes into the family stuff, where Fleur gives one or two examples to Cho to say, this is the position you were in the family. So Cho isn't the oldest, but she's the oldest of a group of kids. And that there's quite a large family. So she's not biologically the oldest. She's middle kid, actually.
She's kind of like you.
Yes, that's a good yes. If anybody knows my past of 9 children, but me being the oldest of the youngest 4.
And a big break between
2 families, so to speak.
Oldest 5, yeah.
Yes. So Fleur explains to her, hey, mom and dad put a lot of responsibility on you that you had to figure out everybody's emotions. And mom and dad's older kids, but sort of like not too much because the oldest sibling was managing them, so to speak. But you were supposed to manage feelings, fixing, keeping things going for the rest of the family, the ones younger than her. And you weren't supposed to ask questions because parents weren't all around all the time. At a very young age, you were supposed to just step in and have these knowings. But you didn't, so there was no process. You weren't being taught processes. You had to get in and just do.
Okay, let's also label it parentified.
Yes.
Like, none of this is okay if this is a kid.
Exactly. And so now Cho is in this work environment. She's married. She's got kids. She's doing the same thing to her partner, who's a child, with her own children. And he's reliant on her to be the parent, to do these things, to figure these things out, to solve the problems, just to say. But he's also really angry with her and is really annoyed with her and is just doing his own thing now because he doesn't want to be treated like a child. So he's in a conundrum because he wants to be treated like a child.
Have this conversation with my 7-year-old daily.
And he doesn't want to be treated like a child when it suits him. And then when it suits him not to be treated like a child, she's the problem. Just like mommy and daddy would be the problem when you want to individuate from mommy and daddy, but now it's your wife and you can't. Right? So now he's really stuck. He's created his own very stuck relationship, but is also somewhat happy in it.
Yeah.
And like very much, so much so that he doesn't want Cho to change. But the work environment is saying you have to change, at least here, or you're not going to be able to stay. So you have to figure this out, Cho, because we're not going to allow you to continue to be in the role you've been in your family and you've of origin, and that you have now created and perpetuated with your partner and your children. So the boss is pretty much putting it on the table, like, Cho, you're going to slow down and create healthier processes, and you're going to ask yourself different questions, and these are the questions you're going to ask yourself. Like, if I don't do my own job and fulfill my own role, what's going to happen to me as a consequence? And that consequence, Cho, is going to be that we don't need you. Right?
Yeah, this boss is also teaching her how to be a better parent.
Yes. And a better partner.
Person.
Just, better sibling, like better daughter, like just better in every single way. But it means that she's literally going to have to change who she is, which a part of her wants to very much. And Fleur is standing there saying, look, it's okay. It's okay if you do change, because at the end of the day, you're going to end up loving your job way more. Your coworkers are going to love you more. You're going to get the advancement and the financial independence that you need. And then Cho says to Fleur, yeah, but what about my marriage? And Fleur comes back and says, well, can we look at it as an opportunity for growth, which is what marriage by definition is. Because if you're going to be in a relationship with one person for the rest of your life, when your children are grown and gone, you're going to go through tons of change. Like you can't fight all of the change because they just happen because we age and because children grow up and leave, etc. So are you and your partner going to adapt to the change, or are the two of you fundamentally going to stay stuck in this and not use healthier processes? And Cho just kind of looks at me and she goes, that's impossible. She goes, how would I ever be able to do all the processes at work and then be a completely different person at home? And she says, that just doesn't seem to sit right with me. She says, I feel I would have to change at home too, because it would be a lack of integrity.
There you
I
go.
would just be acting.
Incongruent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Fleur says, exactly. And so then Cho says to Fleur, what do I do? Like, she wants to ask the question to Fleur, what do I do? And she wants Fleur to take the responsibility to say it. And Fleur says, oh, Cho, I love you. Like, I can come in and tell you how much I love you. I'm happy to tell you that you need to ask yourself different questions, and that so that you have different processes in life. Because mom and dad didn't give you the processes. They didn't want to, or they would have lost control of you. Your partner doesn't want you to ask different questions either, because it will fully change who you are and how you function with levels of responsibility in the marriage. Levels of responsibility that your husband should have, that he doesn't want to take. He wants you to carry those responsibilities.
When it works for him.
Yeah. And the same thing with the way that she's raising her children, where they don't take full responsibility age appropriately. And that she's condoning that as well. And so does the husband, except when he's mad that it inconveniences him and his schedule and his life and his friends and his job. And then he's mad as hell. But he's not going to do anything about it. He wants Cho to be responsible to do that for him. So when Fleur explains that, Cho just sits there and she goes, my life in a nutshell. And I said, and I'll bet you that you're frustrated, you're mad, you're sad, you're irritated, and she goes, yeah. And then Fleur says, and here's where it's holding stress in your body. It's in your neck, it's in your headaches, and she starts to explain the body parts. It's in that you can't sleep at night, that you're waking up through the night, that your brain is busy, that you're trying to say to your doctor that you think you've got ADHD, which actually was true. And Cho said, oh my God, I've been looking it up and thinking that I have this, but self-diagnosing. But you're right. I wanted to book an appointment to go get diagnosed, because then I would be able to say to my boss, my brain doesn't work this way. And the boss is saying, no, it's not that your brain doesn't work that way, Cho. We have evidence that at certain times it completely does work this way. We're not going to take that as an answer because we've seen evidence to the contrary. And so you see Cho is like relieved. So she's like, okay, so if I don't have ADHD, if I don't have ADD, then maybe what I've got actually is just this processing problem. But it's because I didn't mature and that I don't know the right questions to ask. And Fleur says, that's right. And that's why I came today with the examples and different questions for you. Like, if this isn't my problem, what would I be thinking? What would I be doing? Well, she'd be doing her own damn job. Well, she might actually be doing her own hobbies. And when I said that, Cho says, so I just had a fight with my husband about that. How am I ever going to have the time to do my own hobbies? And how does he find all the time to do his? And here Fleur is saying, well, it's partly because you're asking the wrong questions. So it brings us to the end of the session where Cho really has understood through the examples and the unhealthy questions and the healthy questions how important new processes are to her life. And she's so grateful that Fleur, being her sister, sees all of it from her whole life right down to childhood, so that Cho can really understand this is a me job and this is not about my coworkers. It's not about other people. It's about what I need to do. And just at the very end of the session, can't thank Fleur enough.
I love this. And like this is why I love sessions, because here's your clarity, here's your direction, here's, I'll say, somewhat relief, because that's a lot of anxiety knowing how much you have to work through. But at least relief having the direction where to start. And it's also why I love life coaching, because the processes that you're talking about, the questions that people don't know how to ask, is exactly what I get to give. And that's just a joy. So thank you. I think many people are going to resonate with this, with the anxiety of what Cho experiences. So hopefully others are feeling clarity too. Thank you for listening to Coffee with the Sarlos. If you enjoyed the show today, please be sure to subscribe on your podcast platform and leave a review. New shows will air every other Saturday.